In recent years, remote work has increased exponentially, allowing one to earn a paycheck while still enjoying the comforts of home. Yet many more Americans still find themselves commuting daily, trudging through traffic, and dealing with some of the worst congestion in the world just to earn an income. On average, those who commute in the U.S. end up having to travel 41 miles a day to and from work, totaling close to an hour, which is usually not compensated for. And those who find themselves commuting just 5 miles in the major cities around the country end up finding their travel times just as long, if not longer, than those who live in more rural areas. Congestion, traffic delays, and commutes are so bad in the United States that among the top 10 worst cities in the world, American cities take up half the list. So today we will specifically be looking at the U.S. cities with the worst commutes to gain a better understanding of why they're as bad as they are and hopefully see if there are alternative options in those areas for people who still have to travel for work. But first, please remember to hit those like and subscribe buttons to stay updated on all new content from the channel. Now let's get started. Number 10, Atlanta, Georgia. After World War II, the United States federal government started funding the mass buildings of the interstate highway system, taking on 9/10 of the cost. Despite this, they still allowed the states to plan the layouts, hoping that city officials would have the best interests of their citizens in mind. Many U.S. cities, such as Atlanta, did just that, but not in the way the federal government had hoped, and definitely not for the betterment of its citizens. Instead of building highways that would create a fluid traffic system, many states like Georgia started using the highways to create traffic patterns that would direct drivers to the more amicable parts of the cities. The results of this is the modern-day Tom Moreland Interchange, aka the Spaghetti Junction in Atlanta, which is one of the worst spots for commuters and truck drivers alike in the entire nation. While the Spaghetti Junction is the most infamous example with its confusing mess of overlapping intersections, spots like the Downtown Connector also create some of the worst bottlenecks imaginable when I-75 and I-85 merge. On top of the length of the commute itself, Atlanta drivers can expect an added delay of around 74 hours per year, creating $1,257 in unnecessary costs and totaling $3.1 billion loss annually for the city of Atlanta. If you do find yourself trying to navigate Atlanta, it's best to avoid rush hour. Use GPS and navigation apps such as Waze for alternative route suggestions, or try to take back roads when possible, as a shorter drive on the highway can actually end up taking twice as long. Number 9, Houston, Texas. Houston, Texas has a population of around 2.3 million, making it the 4th largest U.S. city by population. In order to accommodate these large numbers and their commute needs, Houston also plays home to around 16,000 miles of paved roads. Unfortunately, that's too much road for the city to keep up with, and because of that, there are a lot of places where road conditions are subpar to say the least. As for the rest, road crews in Houston are constantly having to work on the more frequented areas in order to keep them functioning, create constant construction and maintenance work that causes traffic holdups. To add to that, the limited public transportation in Houston ensures that most in the city have to rely on automobiles for getting around. And as we all know, everything's bigger in Texas, including the vehicles. And when there are tens of thousands of big trucks and semis frequenting the large interstates like I-10 and I-45 daily, the roads will wear faster. For the average driver in Houston, they can expect their already long commute of around 54 minutes, both ways on average, to be increasingly delayed every year by about 74 hours, giving them around $1,367 in unnecessary added costs. In total, the city of Houston loses approximately $3.7 billion annually due to its congestion. The Houston Police and the Texas Department of Transportation both have Twitter accounts where they regularly update any information regarding traffic delays, active construction zones, and other helpful information for those trying to navigate the heavily populated city. But as we said before, navigation and traffic apps can be great time savers also. Number 8. Washington, D.C. In 1790, Pierre Charles L'Enfant was commissioned to plan the layout for the District of Columbia with the intent of it being the capital for the newly formed United States of America. 10 short years later, Congress moved their operations there, cementing the completion of the plan amidst the construction of the city. Today, millions of people from around the world travel to Washington, D.C. to see the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, and any number of other monuments or museums that dot the capital. In addition, D.C. is also home to more than 750 libraries, including the world's largest conglomeration of research material found in one spot at the Library of Congress. And while all of this is great for the city's economy and infrastructure, anyone needing to commute to work or even go grocery shopping in the city will get seriously frustrated with the added traffic said tourism brings to the already congested areas. On top of the already lengthy commutes that many may face in DC, drivers can expect 83 hours of annual delays, costing them $1,398 in added expenses. The congestion and poor driving conditions cost the city a total of $3.5 billion in 2022. One good thing about getting around in DC, however, is that it was designed very well on a grid system, making it easy to familiarize yourself with the streets. As something is always going on in the city, it's best to always keep updated so you know which roads may be blocked off or which areas may have delayed traffic. The best option in Washington, D.C. is public transportation, of which there is a lot. The Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority runs bus and train routes throughout the entire city, passing some of the more popular tourist destinations and heavy work areas. Number 7. San Francisco, California. San Francisco is a beautiful bay city, renowned the world over for its multiculturalism and for sites like the famous Golden Gate Bridge. And while the population of the city itself is only around 810,000 people, there are millions who live in the Bay Area, which includes the surrounding counties. And among those, many travel into the city for work. Unfortunately, this means that much of the traffic that needs to come into and leave the city for similar working hours ends up bottlenecking on both the Golden Gate Bridge and the equally important San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge. This has been a problem for years now, and well before the pandemic, the city relied heavily on its public transportation sector. Recently, the area's public transportation system has proven ineffective, and many have already started to rely on themselves. Unfortunately, those doing so will find an average of 97 hours added to their commutes annually, costing them around $1,642 in unnecessary expenses, as San Francisco loses an estimated $2.6 billion in total. Thankfully, the city has been working on adding bus routes to make public transportation more reliable. But for those who still wish to drive, there are multiple apps and radio stations in the area, like 106.9 FM and 1070 AM, dedicated to providing San Fran commuters with regular traffic updates. Once you're in the city and past the insane bridge traffic, instead of using popular routes like Marina Boulevard, check your GPS system for alternate ways to your destination. If at all possible, just avoid the city's rush hour traffic altogether, or there's a pretty good chance you'll find yourself stuck on a bridge at 8 a.m. or 5 p.m. Number 6. Los Angeles, California. Los Angeles, California is the entertainment capital of the world, and as many as 50 million people per year make it a point to travel there as tourists. That's to say nothing of the 3.8 million people who live there and the thousands more who have to drive into and around the city to get to work, despite the heavy tourism and congested traffic. Interstates like I-5 South, the section from Washington Boulevard to I-110, and I-10 are constantly ranked as some of the worst in the nation. Meanwhile, heavy tourist hubs like LAX and Hollywood make it impossible for commuters to navigate on any given day. After the city saw an average of 102 hours lost per driver in 2017, the Southern California Association of Governments took serious initiative by enacting the 100 Hours Project, through which they intend to identify and eliminate the causes of congestion in Los Angeles. Despite official efforts, however, the average LA driver can still expect to lose around 95 hours per year in delays, in addition to their commutes, costing $1,601 annually for the individual and $8.6 billion for the city. Getting out of downtown LA or Hollywood in the afternoons is one of the most painful experiences imaginable. So when going there, public transportation is better, at least to save some money, if nothing else. Number 5, Miami, Florida. Miami is one of the most beautiful cities in the United States, with its palm tree-lined streets, Cuban influences, and year-round gorgeous beaches. The Cuban influence that has inspired the architecture, street food, and areas like Little Havana is evidence of the city's multicultural past and location, just a short boat ride from Cuba itself. But despite a lower population than other cities on this list, with around 440,000 residents currently, it has still garnered a reputation for some of the most congested traffic in the nation. Thanks to a serious lack of public transportation, the majority of Miami residents need an automobile if they wish to travel further than their local neighborhood. Anyone driving the Palmetto Expressway will deal with the infamous drivers of Hialeah. Meanwhile, drivers on the 836, aka the Dolphin Expressway, will find themselves jammed up in the toll lanes without a sun pass, the Florida toll pass system that makes navigating the interstates and highways a bit less stressful. Drivers in Miami can expect an average delay of 105 hours annually, costing them $1,773 individually and losing the city around $4.5 billion. And due to the already too small highways around Miami frequently undergoing construction, drivers will regularly find themselves bottlenecked. Number 4, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania is a historic American city with a population of around 1.6 million and buildings older than the nation itself. Sites like Independence Hall, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and the Franklin Institute bring visitors from the world over, and pop culture drives them to try a cheesesteak while climbing the steps from Rocky and singing the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song. Unfortunately, as we've seen already, heavy tourism can make it difficult for commuters to navigate their home turf. And worse yet, the 18th century buildings and street planning never allotted for the technological powerhouse known as the automobile industry that would be invented and popularized a couple of centuries later. Today, the narrow streets of Philly create a bottleneck effect and can gridlock entire blocks at a time, while interstates like I-76 and I-676 haunt drivers. The worst area in the city is between North Broad Street and Germantown Avenue, where the historic architecture bottlenecks drivers and constant traffic is ensured by the main and medical campuses for Temple University. On average, commuters in Philly can expect an added loss of 114 hours per year, equating to a monetary loss of $1,925 for the individual and $4.5 billion for the city. Thankfully, Philadelphia has recognized the problem and has made some efforts to increase the usage of public transportation, which has about half the riders compared to pre-pandemic numbers. Meanwhile, radio stations like 1060 AM and 103.9 FM constantly update drivers about road conditions and delays. The best routes can change depending on the time of day and your destination, so it's always best to check your GPS and take side roads away from the interstates and historical districts when possible. Number 3. New York, New York. With a population of around 8.5 million, New York City is the largest city in the United States and has been made famous through everything from its famous architecture like the Empire State Building, its historic value as the hub of immigration in the U.S. at Ellis Island, and by being a financial capital with people from the world over traveling to Wall Street to conduct business. There are few cities as famous as NYC, and unfortunately, there are few with worse commutes. Millions of tourists annually will wander its streets, ignoring jaywalking laws. Meanwhile, the insane drivers constantly honking their horns and screaming will provide a distraction to the calmest among us as they block the box, causing jam-ups at the intersections despite the signs that specifically say, "Don't block the box," found all over the city. The many bridges and tunnels, like the Holland Tunnel and the Queensboro Bridge, will bottleneck so frequently that the average speed of an NYC commuter is only around 12 miles per hour during peak times, which locals even admit is generous. On average, NYC drivers can expect 117 hours annually in delays that cost the individual $1,976 and the city $10.2 billion. When there is a multitude of transportation options to choose from, it seems odd to put yourself through the stresses of road rage-fueled New Yorkers, constant construction projects throughout the 5 boroughs, and the mindless droves of pedestrians jumping in front of cars. In addition to this, you can't turn right on red anywhere in the city, meaning you're always stuck at red lights, regardless of the situation. Thankfully for those who must and desire to use it, New York City offers public transportation such as its world-famous subway and bus systems. Number 2. Boston, Massachusetts. Much like the other entry on this list, Philadelphia, Boston is a historic city that's older than the nation itself. When the area was being settled and Boston was formed in the 17th century, people were essentially building roads as needed, without any scope of a larger building plan. By the time Boston was an established city, it was only partially developed on a grid, with the rest a confusing jumble of crisscrossing streets going in every direction. While the city itself is beautiful and filled with ivy-covered brick buildings and sites to make any historian blush, getting to those buildings and historical sites can prove difficult. The better planned streets can be found in areas like South Boston and Dorchester Heights because they were able to be redeveloped, whereas historically protected areas need to remain preserved. On top of the streets proving almost too narrow when the invention of automobiles came along, Boston is famous for its aggressively loud drivers and terrible roads that are in disrepair. On average, Boston commuters can expect additional delays that total 134 hours annually and generate a loss of $2,270 per individual and $4.3 billion for the city. Luckily, Boston is a very walkable city if you can find an apartment or home within walking distance of your job. Not to mention the MBTA trains and buses that will take you to most of the more congested areas for a fairly low fee. However, anyone who needs to drive should tune in to WBZ News Radio 1030 for traffic updates and any information on construction or jams. Also, be very aware of events, as the areas like Fenway Park, home to the Boston Red Sox, create chaos downtown, especially when they win the pennant. Number 1. Chicago, Illinois. The Windy City is one of the United States' greatest cities, with a population of around 2.7 million. It's also home to some of the best food in the country, like the deep dish pizza that Chicago made famous, historic buildings like the Art Institute of Chicago, and a number of sports teams that residents take pride in, including the Bulls, Bears, Cubs, and White Sox. Unfortunately, It also has the second most congested traffic in the world, just behind London. While the number of year-round athletic teams, events, and tourists provide revenue for the city, it also means that there is almost always some big event going on, making the already congested traffic much worse on a regular basis. When you combine these events and traffic congestion with the notoriously harsh winters of Chicago, you create a breeding ground for reckless driving and accidents galore. Commuters in Chicago can expect to be delayed an average of 155 hours, costing the individual an eye-watering $2,618 annually and the city $9.5 billion. Those who aren't used to driving around Chicago may want to use public transportation, as the interstates are more commonly named in the city instead of the usual numbering. As your GPS tells you to connect I-290, the signs will say to enter Dan Ryan Expressway, creating confusion in an already hectic environment. The Chicago Transit Authority works tirelessly to provide citizens with a number of bus and train routes alike, although the number of people using these services is still well below pre-pandemic numbers, exasperating just how many drivers are now frequenting the streets of Chicago. Anyone who needs to drive in the city should tune into WBBM News Radio or 103.5 KISS FM to get regular traffic updates and notifications for delays and events. Well, that brings us to the end, folks. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to do us a huge favor and hit those like and subscribe buttons to keep new content coming. See you next time.